Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to week number 9. I'm running out of fingers here. Week 9 here in CA 102, Culinary Concepts and Foundations. Time is flying by, isn't it? How many people think this course is going by quick? Thumbs up. Look at Latonia. Yeah, if you're barely hanging on, look at that. Yeah, it's flying. It's going by awfully quick for Chef Matthew and I as well. And I think in a couple of weeks, we're going to be awfully sad to see your faces roll on. But you'll still see us in one way or another running around the program. Last week was big, wasn't it? How many people found themselves really busy in the kitchen last week, huh? Yeah? Yeah. Well, you know what, ladies and gentlemen? We kind of peaked out last week as far as the size of our assignments and the complexity of them. So not that we're going straight downhill this week, but things are going to be a little bit easier for here on out. We have 4 assignments left, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So it would be very wise for all of you guys just to take a few extra minutes and take a look down the road to see what's coming your way so you can kind of get yourselves planned out for the remainder of this course. You have to remember when you move on to your next class, which is 121, you're not using recipes, you're using techniques. And so, Chef Matthew and I have really been talking to all of you the past couple of weeks about focus on technique, technique, technique. And you're going to hear that again today. And the reason is when you get into 121, you're going to know what you're doing. And you're going to be able to explore a little bit and expand upon that creativity. And Chef Matthew, you can comment on this, but when I cook, I love to always add a little bit of what I do into the food. And to really have to focus on a singular recipe can be really difficult sometimes. You really have to constrain yourself. Don't you, Chef Matthew?
Yeah, I find myself, anytime I look at a recipe that's new, I kind of look it over and go, well, I'm going to do this. And, if it's somebody else's recipe, if I'm working for someone, you got to honor that recipe. And I may ask a few questions about it, but I always get these ideas what I want to do. Early in my career, I would follow exactly every time I made a recipe to make sure I learned how to do it. Then I would go crazy with it the second time I made it. So I do recommend.
Great job, ladies and gentlemen, controlling yourselves. Because I know, I'm sure some of you ran across this last assignment. I'm sure you were just dying to add a little something extra into some of those recipes to make them your own. But it's going to pay off in the long run. And one word of caution as you move it is 121. Less is more when it comes to cooking. You find a lot with young culinarians. They want to add everything, including the kitchen sink, into that pot, thinking it's going to make it taste better. And it doesn't work that way. Less is more. You have to be able to taste your ingredients and understand those flavors as they roll across your palate. And when you get too much in there, it's just like when you paint, right? The more colors of paint you put on a single line, the more muddled it becomes. And that's the way food is. And so you really need to focus on that. How'd everybody like that, the vichyssoise, the potato leek soup? No, Tonya, what was that? Was that a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Latonia up there is good. Yeah. Everybody else kind of like it? Yeah. Nate's down there going like this. Sandra's got 2 thumbs up. What about you, Ivory? Yeah, thumbs up. Adam? Daniel? Yeah. Okay, that's a pretty good. That's pretty good. Usually that recipe can kind of be a little bit iffy. For some people, it's a very classic, hundreds-of-year-old soup. Vichyssoise is what it goes by on its street name, but it is a classic soup. Lots of different ways you can go with it. From adding, we used to do a vichyssoise, and then we would spike a creme fraiche, which is very similar to like a sour cream, with chipotle, and then kind of hit some different flavors in there that way. Anybody try it when it was warm? Yeah. Was it warm, better hot or better cold?
I liked it better warm, honestly.
When
I was done with the thing today, I actually warmed some up, and it was better that way, I thought.
I love that. Anybody else feel that way? Yeah.
I do.
You do? Yeah. All right. This is why I asked, because you guys soon, this is just like going to literature class or English class. You're learning how to write. Now you guys are going to be able to author your own food. And, some people may find that vichyssoise could be just incredibly one of the best soups ever. You could take it and add some cannellini beans and some, andouille sausage to it and jack it up. But now that you guys are getting to that stage, you guys can go in that direction. What about the veloute sauce? What do you guys think about that? Yeah.
I could have just drank that
soup.
stuff.
Chicken soup?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Cream and chicken soup.
Anybody feel like you were making gravy?
Yes, I could have just drank it. It was good.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like gravy.
It was like gravy?
Yeah.
'Cause you know what, Sandra? You're right on the money, because that is the
Bingo.
that is the base for the old American gravy. Jay, what about you down there? How'd you like that veloute? Yeah, pretty good. It's an interesting sauce. Lana, did you do anything with the gravy? Did you leave it like it was? Lana? Yeah. That is such a versatile sauce. You have to remember, as we're learning these mother sauces, which there are 5 of them, and we're going to talk about those here in a few minutes. Those are the basis. Those are the foundation to your other sauces that you're going to prepare as you go along in your career. Focus on the technique of learning those sauces. You're going to be a rock star. Tomato sauce. How many people had pasta this week? Yeah, Vincent did up there. Yeah, Ivory.
I made a meatloaf.
Danina, did you have it? Yeah, pasta. How did everybody like the tomato sauce? Yeah, Shaylee likes it. Yeah, thumbs up, thumbs up. That's it. That's a cool technique with the veal bones. That's very, very traditional. It adds that bottom, that base flavor to it that we look for in food. So I really like that recipe. Anybody out there have to use a blender? Yeah? Shaylee, how'd it come out? Did it work okay?
Yeah, it came out pretty creamy and kind of thick.
Uh-huh.
I didn't pour it all in at once. I only put like a little bit of it in there and blended it instead.
Yeah. Blenders are such a convenience for us, but we really try to steer away from them in industry. The reason that is it incorporates a lot of air into your product. That's what allows those blades to spin down at the bottom, and it aerates it. And it'll make your red sauce a lot lighter in color. But then when it comes to the starchy foods like the potato leek, it really affects the viscosity in the way the starches behave and makes them much thicker. So this week we're going to be talking about that here in a few minutes. Chef Matthew, how'd it go in week 8?
Week 8 was really good. I'm very impressed with the narratives have come up a huge level. I mean, the bar is now higher on those, and photos are looking really good. I still have quite a big batch to grade, but photos are looking better. And what you guys are talking about in the narrative, the observations and the taste, that's really important to your development mentally as you get developing how you have your sense of taste and your sense of smell. And it's really interesting because I'm starting to see really deep thought on that. So you're tasting something, and then you're putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with, I'm tasting this because of this, and I'm excited about it. I think it's really cool. And I've learned a lot too. Everybody has their own insight. Everybody has their own strength in their senses. And I think you guys are really digging into it. It's been really fun.
Yeah. That is so awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. It is so important as a culinarian to have to be able to define what you do in words so you can communicate to your staff. Can you imagine going into a kitchen and having a staff of 25 people, and you're trying to explain this recipe to them, but you can't quite describe it very well, and but you expect them to make it exactly the way you want it. There's where these narratives really come into play. I've had kitchen staffs. The largest kitchen staff I ever managed was 175 people. And for me to stand next to 175 cooks in a single day saying, no, it doesn't taste like that. No, I had to learn how to write all those narratives down on paper so I could share it with those other cooks, and boom, then they could turn around and produce it. All of you out there are going to be in those same shoes one day. And especially when it comes to writing menus. How many people are in industry right now? Yeah, some of you, and Jay, I remember you mentioned you've been around in industry for quite a while. And when it comes to writing menus, Nathaniel, when it comes to writing menus, how important is that? Jay, it's critical, isn't it?
Yes, it's very critical.
Yeah, because you have to be able to describe those flavors to people, to your customers. You can't just tell a customer, "Oh yeah, it tastes good." Yeah, I mean, that's not a sales tool. Part of a successful culinarian is being a salesman at the same time. Like it or not, that's a big part of our job. What about how are we doing on all the little things out there, Chef Matthew?
Well, I didn't see any toes again, so that's at least 3 weeks in a row. Hats are good. Uniforms, there's still a couple missing parts, but I'm I guess I should be tougher on that. Should I be tougher on that, everybody? Should I be tougher on uniforms?
Yeah.
You want me to be tough?
Yeah.
On uniforms? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an industry standard. We should really adhere to it. How are you going to get used to it? Because when I taught ground classes, we'd line everybody up, and you didn't get in the classroom if you didn't have the right uniform on. So, but anyway.
At my last position, I was director of food and beverage at a very large hotel, and the executive chef each day at the beginning of each shift would line all the cooks up in the kitchen, and he and I would walk down, and people would hold out their fingernails, check their shoes, check their uniforms, check for thermometers, check everything right off the bat. And so this is part of what happens in industry. It's not.
They even check their socks at Olive Garden.
What's that?
They even check their socks at Olive Garden.
Do they really?
Yeah, you had to have the black socks or you got sent home.
Oh no, you don't wear like Christmas socks then, do you?
No.
No. I wonder if they can get away with that. I wonder if there's a law about that.
Well, we did black socks too when I taught ground classes, and then at Christmas there was a day we would allow people to wear Christmas socks. So.
Well, okay. Yeah. All right, everybody. What about station setup, Chef Matthew?
They're looking good. They're at some people I can tell you're challenged with space, and I'm just trying to be reasonable on that. If I see all the ingredients, if I see the proper tools, cutting board, and everything, I like to look at that stuff as like that's kind of behind us. So we've already learned that, we're already doing it. But Chef, I'm getting the photos. I'm getting good photos. Some people I've asked them to work on their light, and their photos are better. So I think, and I've also asked people to go back to the submission page, the very front where it tells you what to take pictures of, and they're going back. They're looking at those, and they're seeing that they might have missed the picture. And I'm taking points off and then saying, hey, resubmit. You got time. Get that picture taken and send it to me. And they're doing it. So
awesome.
I'm giving out big scores.
Now I know you and I spoke earlier in the week, and I see a lot of awesome students up on the screen right now. And you came up with a very interesting idea about helping people get their assignments in a little bit more of a timely fashion. Would you like to talk about that a bit?
Well, yeah, and there's one part of it you and I haven't figured out yet, but what we want to do is give extra credit if you turn it in by Sunday.
Then we'll call this a tease, right? And we'll unleash the official details of this program via a Moodle message this coming week. How's that sound?
So for those of you that want extra credit, maybe there's people who aren't listening right now, but will listen to the archive, And if they don't listen to the archive, they're not going to know. But if you are listening and you need some extra credit or you want to make up some points, that's going to be a great way to do it. You can turn them in. If you turn them in by Sunday from here on out, that could give you a lot of extra credit. So
awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about that. And I think there's a lot of deserving people out there. So it will really help. Before we move on, I wanted to ask Nate down there a question. We have a lot of students that call on a regular basis looking for support in one way or the other. And, I urge everybody that's out there to pick up the phone and call. And I think sometimes there's some hesitancy, like we're bothering him or the chefs are busy. These chefs are here to work with you. Nate, what's it like? How often do you call and what kind of support do you get?
I could say I call quite often when I need help. Usually every week when I have assignment, if I have any questions, I'm usually calling them. And they're willing to sit down and take the time to help you guys out. Don't hesitate ever, like they said, because they're willing to put in the effort to help you guys out. Because some of these assignments, everyone knows they're going to be challenging and we're going to need questions asked. And just give them a call, no matter what. If you need help, that's the best thing to do. Yep.
Don't call Geico, call us, because we're here to help, right? So, and Nate calls quite a bit, and it's our pleasure to help. That's what we're here for. So don't sit back thinking, oh, I don't understand it. I don't know it. What should I do? Pick up the phone and say, hey, chef, I don't understand this. That's what we're here for. Both of our phone numbers are listed on the side of the class page. So, and then real quick, before we move on to our exciting week that's coming up here this week, knowledge checks. I know a few people out there are missing their knowledge checks on a regular basis. Unfortunately, it's a cumulative effect, right? So if you miss 10 points this week and 10 points next week, now you're down 20 and then 30 and then 40. Don't do that. Take the knowledge checks are real quick, real simple. Read the research material and then just do the knowledge check. You can take it as many times as you need to until you get the highest score possible. And then boom, it's done. It's probably 15 minutes of your week that you should set to the side and just do it, get it done, call it good. So don't forget those knowledge checks, everybody. They're real important because they do accumulate and they do take you down after a little while. With that being said, how many of you are tired of potatoes, right? You guys remember all the potatoes? Chaylee's like, yeah. Dan's yeah. Nate's kind of sort of so. Guess what we get to work with this week? Taters. Yeah, we are back in potato country, but the good news is the knife cuts are not the critical focus this week. You guys are actually going to be cooking them and making some exciting dishes with these potatoes this week. Taking a look at our class page over here for week 9. Is everybody taking a look at this intro video that's being produced each week? If you haven't, please do. There's a lot of effort that goes into producing those videos by yours truly. They're about 30 seconds long, and there's actually no video editing in them, so it's just kind of raw material, but certainly take a moment to look at them. This week, 2 knowledge checks due by Saturday, right? Is that correct? So let's make sure we get those in. Following the class tonight, just turn off end the live session. Do your knowledge checks. Get them done. Boom, out of the way. No discussion board this week, but there is one next week. Live session. If you're here, that's awesome. Chef Matthew and I were talking about this earlier today. There's quite a few people that will call up and say, I don't understand how to do this. And generally, Chef Matthew or myself will often say, did you see the live session? Because the information's in there. Whoops, could have had a V8, right? So taking a look at what we got going on this week, we're going to be preparing 3 dishes. One is puree de pommes, fancy word for mashed potatoes, but it's a very French technique that we need to learn on. We're going to be doing scallop potatoes and then also dauphinoise potatoes. And they're very similar techniques, but you're going to use different products and hopefully end up with the same technique. Down here at the bottom of the page, this week we have 3 videos by Chef Luke. We're going to take a look at them here in a minute. And then we also have the potato help folder. certainly during this week, if you have any challenges at all, which you might because these are a little bit more tricky assignments, open up that folder, take a look. It's got excellent information in there. It's got bechamel sauce, photos, recipes, etc., etc. So going back to our potato story here. It's kind of exciting, so don't worry too much about the fact that you're going to be cutting potatoes all week, because it's probably not going to happen. It's a pretty quick slicing and dicing. So this week, I'm going to mention this a couple of times. We are making 3 dishes, right? One is a palm puree, which is mashed potatoes. The other one is scallop with waxy potatoes, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. And then the other one is dauphinoise potatoes with starchy potatoes. And we're going to talk about the difference in all those things here in just a moment. So when it comes to potatoes, just real quick, number one, when you go out, you purchase your potatoes, you want to look for a nice firm potato, one that's smooth, right? One that's not growing anything out of it yet, because that's not so good, because that means that potato's been sitting on your grocery shelf for a while. You want to make sure you avoid potatoes with any kind of green growing underneath the surface, because eating that in higher levels can be toxic to your body and can make you sick. So you want to get firm potatoes, nice and smooth, and if they have any kind of eyes on them, make sure that they're shallow, because it's going to create a lot of problems for you down the road of having to dig all those eyes out. So, you know, now that you've bought your potatoes, you bring them home, you want to make sure that you store those potatoes. How many people put potatoes in the refrigerator? A couple of you do, right? That is a major no-no. And the reason for that is there's lots of different foods we don't like to refrigerate. Onions, sweet potatoes, yellow potatoes, russet potatoes. And the reason for that is that cold air inside the walk-in refrigerator or other refrigerators convert the starches into sugars, right? Simple sugars. So when they cook, they brown and they burn much quicker. So you want to make sure that you store them in a cool, dry, dark area, because the potatoes are also UV sensitive, and the light will destroy them. So make sure that you keep them in a cool, dark place. It's very, very important.
They also being stored in the fridge like that, you want the starch for, especially for mashed potatoes, you want your potatoes fluffy. So if they are baked potatoes, you want them fluffy too. So if they're stored in the cooler, then that starts to convert to sugar, and then you bake them or you mash them and they're just not fluffy. They just won't fluff. They won't mash as well. It really affects them.
Yep. The more fluffy, the more fun, right? Mm-hmm. So with this week, we're going to be slicing these potatoes into very thin disc, about 1/8 of an inch or so. And it may take some of you a little bit of time to be slicing them. Remember that potatoes are extremely sensitive to oxidization, meaning that after you peel them and slice them, they're going to turn brown on you. So if you find that you're going to be running a little bit slower on this, or you plan on getting interrupted, make sure you get yourself a vessel with cool water in it. And as you're slicing these potatoes, they go into the cool water to prevent them from turning brown. It's very, very important. If you start with a brown potato to make dauphinoise potatoes, guess what you're going to end up with? Brown dauphinoise potatoes. Who would have thought, right? So you want to make sure that as you're slicing them, they go into water to prevent them from browning. And it's also a good trick too, that if you plan on doing these, you could prep your potatoes out on Thursday, slice them up, put them in the water, and then assemble your product on Friday. That is an option as well. So that could save you a little bit of time. So if you have an extra half hour on Thursday night, go ahead and do it. And then prep your potatoes out on Friday. Just make sure that you drain and dry those potatoes. Pat them dry with a paper towel before you assemble your dauphinoise and your scallop potatoes as well. That's
one suggestion I have for slicing those potatoes, to get them absolutely paper thin. If you can't do that with a knife, here's a trick that's really easy. Use your peeler. So after you peel the potato, from end to end, like I'm peeling my mouse here, and you peel it, then hold it like this and peel it right off the top, and just one right after the other right into water. And they'll be super thin. They'll cook perfectly. They also make really good potato chips like that because it's perfectly thin, super easy to cut. So.
And I wanted to take one quick second here. As a chef, whenever I am at tableside and I'm talking to guests and we're talking about the meal, or I'm working with young culinarians, I always like to have a little bit of knowledge behind what I'm talking about, especially when it comes to fun things like potatoes. And these are some cool facts about potatoes. If you want to take a moment and just look at this, I never realized it, but the average American eats about 124 pounds of potatoes a year. And then, thank God for the Germans, they eat twice as much as we do. That's a whole other story. But and then Thomas Jefferson gets the credit for introducing the French fry to the United States at a White House dinner. And that's kind of a cool, fun fact to talk to your guest about when you're at the table with them. It's also kind of cool to note that potatoes are also about 80% water and only about 20% solid. So that is something you really need to be concerned about, especially when it comes to working with Kennebec potatoes or russet potatoes or red potatoes. Moisture content really does affect the dish that you are preparing. So learning about that is critical. Talk about a low-calorie food, too. Only about 100 calories for an 8-ounce baked potato, but you kill it with the butter and the sour cream and the cheese, but at least you feel good because that potato only has 100 calories, right? You're saving a little weight. Potatoes, 99% fat-free food, yet it is considered by the federal government that it is a nutrient-dense food, meaning it's very high in minerals and vitamins. And then who knew and who would have thought, but the sweet potato is considered the world's healthiest vegetable based on vitamin and mineral content. So they are extremely healthy for you and a great dish to eat. Absolutely. So we learned a little bit about potatoes, how we buy them, where we store them. Chef Matthew came up with some good peeling. We know that we have to keep them in water when we do that. And now we need to focus on the two primary types of potatoes that we're going to be working with this week. We're going to be working with starchy and waxy potatoes. Does anybody know the difference out there? Yeah, Lana does. A couple of you, Jay does. Yeah, Ivory does. Yeah, a couple of you out there do. There's a huge difference in potatoes. Not all potatoes are cracked up to be the same, literally. Waxy potatoes can be considered red potatoes, Yukon Gold potatoes, which really aren't a potato to begin with, new potatoes, and they get the term waxy because oftentimes they can be coated in wax before they hit market as a preservative because they are higher in moisture and they do have a tendency to mold and rot quicker than does the starchy counterpart. Starchy potatoes, on the other hand, are considered potatoes such as russet potatoes, Idaho potatoes. They're favored because they're very high in starch. Starch is a form of carbohydrate, complex form of carbohydrates, but they're very low in moisture as well. And since they are a little bit higher in starch, they're really good for frying, for baking, for boiling. But they do not hold their shape well once they've been cooked. But they do make things very, very fluffy because of that high starch content. So they're perfect for gratins and the palm puree and the other dishes, the dauphinoise potato that we're working with this week. And then if we take a look at the waxy potatoes, whenever I think of them, those are the small potatoes, generally the smaller varieties. Yukon Gold potatoes, for example, are a hybrid developed by the University of Washington for a plot of land in Washington State to grow potatoes. So they're really not even a naturally occurring product. It is a GMO product. But they have a low starch content, but they're very high in sugars. And what that means is if you were to go to fry, I don't know if anybody's ever tried to make French fries out of like a red beet potato or something like that, and they brown very, very quickly, and they don't get real firm. And that's because of that high moisture content and that high sugar content in there. But they are excellent for boiling or steaming, making potato salads and casseroles and that kind of stuff. They work great if you ever cube them and make the home fries, that kind of stuff. So those are the two primary differences. The starchy, just remember high starch, low moisture. Waxy, remember high sugar, high moisture, and that's the primary difference between the two potatoes. And once you get into industry, you're going to really have to recognize the difference between the two potatoes. They are not really interchangeable, and you really have to pay attention to that. A lot of people ask about what's the best French fry for making chips and making French fry, or what's the best potato for making French fries and chips and that kind of stuff. And it's definitely the Kennebunk potato. If you ever get a chance to work with those, they're absolutely fantastic. They look similar in nature to a russet, but they're very high in starch, very, very low in moisture. And when they cook, they crisp up very, very nicely. So they're absolutely awesome. This week, Dauphinoise potatoes. How many out there have had Dauphinoise before? Yeah? That's a hard word to spell, let alone pronounce. All right? So the Dauphinoise, it's a classic dish. It's done by the French. I would say hundreds of years old. If I was to describe it to somebody, I would say it's layers of thinly sliced potatoes in a rich cream with garlic, leek, salt, pepper, and Gruyere cheese over the top. And we're going to talk about the term au gratin, which we are looking for this week. Does anybody know the term au gratin out there? No? Kind of? Yeah? A few of you guys do? Okay. Jay certainly does. Au gratin is a term that we refer to as browning the top of a certain product. French onion soup, for example, served au gratin. Dauphinoise potatoes would be au gratin. You were talking, Chef Matthew, about Duchess potatoes earlier, and we like to serve those au gratin with some nice browning effect after they're piped. So au gratin is referring to the browning effect on the potatoes. And this week, you're going to prepare the Dauphinoise potatoes using starchy potatoes, okay? So you can use Idaho potatoes, you can use russet potatoes, but they need to be starchy potatoes. So it's very, very important to make sure that you do that with the starchy potatoes. And then moving on to our next thing here, and I wanted to pull this up to show everybody real quick. Kind of like what your end product is going to end up with over here. This is an acceptable size portion down here. We're going to get to the rubric here in a few minutes for the assignment page, and it's going to say an entree-sized portion. And we are not interested in a 22-ounce portion of Dauphinoise potato on the plate. That's not what it's asking for. An entree-sized portion of its starch would roughly be 4 to 5 ounces, 4 to 6 ounces maybe, depending on the restaurant. And down here, this is an acceptable size portion, but you can see the au gratin effect on the top where this is nicely browned. And it's got that good looking feel to it, nice and golden. And then once again, this is a classic dish done by the French. The sauce is very thick in this dish, but the thickness does not come from the sauce itself. The starchy potatoes, as they cook, they leach the starch into the milk and the cream, and it thickens the milk and the cream. So when you cut it, there's actually nothing that rolls onto the plate. It all gets absorbed or thickened by the potatoes that are in the sauce. So it's kind of an exciting thing to see. One word of advice to anybody that's never had these before: you might end up in rehab after you have one, because these potatoes are addictive. They are super delicious, and you will, in industry at one point in time or another, serve a variation of these potatoes. So what we're going to be looking for this week with the Dauphinoise potatoes is we're gonna take our potatoes, we're gonna wash them. We've picked out potatoes that are firm, smooth, very few eyes in them. We're gonna peel those after we wash them, and then we're gonna slice them. And you can slice them as Chef Matthew was recommending with the peeler. You can slice them with your chef's knife, or in industry, what we use is a mandolin. And I don't know how many of you out there have worked with a mandolin or not. Some of you have, looks like. But mandolins are extremely critical and very well used in industry. This is a picture of a couple of them over here. This is probably the one in the center is probably the most traditional, old school. They will slice your potatoes very, very thin, 1/16 of an inch if you need them, or an 1/8 of an inch, or 1/4 inch, or 1/2 an inch, whatever size you dictate. It also juliennes, it also bâtonnets, it also does waffle cuts. There is a wide variety of cuts that come from a mandolin. They can be a little bit more expensive. I think this unit here in the center is right around 100, 150 bucks, so you might not want to run out and buy one just yet. There are some less expensive models that certainly do the trick over here that will work. One word of caution: fingers do not like mandolins, right? And Chef Matthew's going down there. What, have you had any experience with these mandolins, Chef Matthew?
Yeah, I know quite a few cooks who cannot be fingerprinted. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, it'll just, I mean, shave it right off, because you get moving with that potato on there, and you get too close. You always want to use the guard, and it's a little slower, but just be safe, because that thing will cut you bad. And thinking price wise, I've been to a couple of Asian markets. They usually have one there, and it's a cheap model, but it's like anywhere from $15 to $20, and it's definitely worth it. I've had those last as long as a year, so that's worth it. Right.
So that makes it kind of nice, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've had one for 20 years in the kitchen. You're probably going to get 4 or 5 years out of them, because they do get tossed around quite a bit. But it is a great tool to invest in. But once again, if you don't want to run out and get one, it's not absolutely necessary for this. You will use your chef's knife to slice them. Make sure that you slice those potatoes very thin, at least 1/8 of an inch, preferably 1/16 of an inch. After you slice them, you're going to put them into water so they don't brown up on you. After you slice them, you're going to take them out of the water, pat them dry with your towel, right? Make sure there's no moisture floating around out there. You're going to layer them into a Pyrex dish, or in industry, what we call a half pan, which is half of a hotel pan, about 2 inches deep. Make sure it's a heavy duty pan. Pyrex works real well if you're at home. You don't want to get a really thin pan, like a little baking pan or something like that, because that will transmit too much heat and you'll crisp up the edges too much. So you're going to start by adding a little bit of the cream milk mixture to the bottom of your pan. You're going to lay out shingles of potatoes, sprinkle some garlic, some salt, some pepper, another layer of shingles of potatoes, some cream, some milk, some garlic, some salt and pepper, another layer of potatoes, and you're going to layer your pan all the way up. So it's like building a roof on top of a roof on top of a roof, with layers of cream, milk, garlic, butter, and sugar in between each layer of potato. A little bit of cream and butter, a little bit of cream and milk over the top, a little bit of garlic, salt, and pepper. You're going to wrap those up, cover them with foil, throw them into your oven. The recipe says for about 30 minutes, and you're going to run into this a lot when you get into industry. About is a very general term, right? There's no true definition of what about means, right? There is a tremendous variation, and this is why we go to culinary school and we learn how to become chefs, because there's a tremendous variation on when these potatoes can and cannot be done. So you want to be able to easily stick your fork or a knife into that dish and be able to get down to the bottom without applying very much pressure. You need to make sure those potatoes hold together, though. And once you get to that stage, it should be about 20 minutes approximately. You're going to remove the foil, and then you're going to put them back into your oven for about 10 minutes to allow that au gratin effect to take over. And then you'll end up with some beautiful potatoes. Make sure you let them sit for a while before you actually serve them. You want to, in the restaurant industry, we'll let them, we'll make them 2 or 3 times a week, place the orders in the walk-in after we portion them out, and then pop them in the oven each time we get an order. So that is the basic runaround with the Dauphinoise potatoes. Starchy potatoes for the Dauphinoise potatoes, Idaho or russet. Remember that, it's a pretty critical part. Let's take a look. Chef Luke has been so kind to give us another great look at the Dauphinoise potatoes here. Looking forward to the music.
Looks good.
That's his mandolin. Very thin potatoes. He doesn't start with a layer of cream and butter on the bottom, but I think it's best.
The recipe kind of talks about it like this. I think it's best too. Oh, nice. Put a steak on that, please. Put a steak on that. Right on top of it.
Yeah, that's a delicious looking dish. And there's so much fun in the restaurant industry. And then one of my restaurants, we used to do Dauphinoise potatoes. We do a layer of russet, layer of sweet potato, layer of green chilies, layer of goat cheese, layer, all the way up. So once you learn this technique, you can have a lot of fun in the direction that you go in. Moving on to the next dish this week, scallop potatoes. I think a lot of you out there have probably made scallop potatoes. Is that true? Yeah. Didn't Mom make those in the 70s? A lot. You know, that was a big dish back then. Scallop potatoes and Dauphinoise potatoes are really sister dishes. They do share a lot in common. However, with the scallop potatoes, you're going to be using a waxy potato, right? The waxy potato is low in starch, high in sugar, correct? So that means we need to introduce a starch into the dish in order for the sauce to thicken. So with that being said, the scallop potatoes are going to be made with bechamel sauce this week. Bechamel is the 4th of the 5 mother sauces that we have prepared here so far in CA 102. And taking a look at the mother sauces real quick. Bechamel is certainly one of the kings of the mother sauce. Everybody out there has probably had some type of sausage and gravy before. That's bechamel. A lot of cream soups out there. Cream of broccoli, Wisconsin cheddar, made with bechamel. What else do we use bechamel for, Chef Matthew?
It's the base for Mornay or macaroni and cheese.
Supreme sauce. Macaroni and cheese, absolutely. Yeah.
White sauce on pizza. Yeah, it's all over the place.
So the mother sauce is critical. I know this seems a little bit old school. You know what? Bechamel, velouté, espagnole, tomato hollandaise. You will make variations to these sauces in industry. This is still really relevant information in today's culinary world. Most of what we do is built upon this. So it is very relative information. So remember those. If you haven't memorized your mother sauces yet, it's a good possibility when you go to an interview for your first job, they're going to ask you about the mother sauces. So
couple quick things on that, Chef, if time is allowing.
Yep.
Just take a notice of that bechamel and think about the velouté sauce you just made. Any bells going off? It's the same procedure. You're changing the liquid. That's it, really. You could add mirepoix to the bechamel if you wanted to bolster the flavor. You could add a sachet to bolster the flavor. What that recipe has is a very simple form of bechamel. It's just milk thickened with roux. So bang, you change the juice, and now you have a different sauce.
Absolutely, yep.
Yep. First interview I had after culinary school. I walked in and had an interview. They called me back for a second interview, and they said, bring a chef coat. And I showed up, and they said, okay, we need you to make béarnaise sauce. There it was.
Yeah. So it's there. And I was working at the Registry Resort, and it was a 5-diamond resort, and this is back in the early 90s. And they said, tell me about your mother sauces. And I'm thinking, oh, my mother's sauces. My mother used to make salsa. No, the mother sauces. And, that was kind of a defining moment in my culinary career there. But we'll talk about that. That's another side story. But then next thing you know, I did know how to make hollandaise sauce and all that from culinary school. But then they're asking me to make Chiron sauce, which is a variation of hollandaise. And so because I learned all those techniques, I was able to carry it forward. A couple of key things to remember when it comes to making bechamel sauce. You're going to be working with roux again. The roux, it should be cooked just to the point where it's still white. I mean, it's a real quick in and out. Make sure that you are working with weight, not volume, when it comes to making your roux. It should be an equal amount of weight of flour, equal amount of weight of fat or clarified butter. I think the recipe calls for 2 ounces of clarified butter this week. And before, I think I forgot to mention, each one of these recipes should be a quarter recipe this week. Not a full recipe. So you're going to make your roux, then you're going to add your milk, and as that sauce comes up to a simmer, make sure you are stirring vigorously. Don't put it on the stove, run outside and talk to a neighbor. Ain't going to happen. You got to stand there, you got to stir that sauce as it comes up. The thicker it gets, the more it encases the heat and the bubbles, and the quicker it boils over onto your stove, and the quicker it burns to the bottom of your pot. Chef Matthew, how many bechamels have you burned?
Oh, man. Yeah, quite a few. Actually, the very first one I didn't burn, and I didn't know what I was doing either. I just stirred the sausage gravy, and it didn't burn. And I was a dishwasher, and they said, let's make him a cook. So that's how it all started.
Another defining moment.
Bechamel.
Yeah. So definitely make sure you tend that sauce very well. Once you get done with your bechamel, make sure you taste it. We've talked to you about not seasoning your dishes till the end. That's not the case here. The bechamel needs to be seasoned very, very well. You have to compensate for the flavor of the potatoes as well. You have to remember, you're going to be slicing those potatoes real thin. You're going to put them into your Pyrex dish. And then with that really well-seasoned bechamel, you're going to be pouring it over the top into the pan. And that bechamel sauce is what's going to become very, very thick. And once again, you're going to put that in the oven for about 20 minutes as well. And then you're going to uncover it, let the gratin effect take place, and then go from there. Chef Luke, I cannot wait to see what music you have provided us with this week.
And he used whole butter there. That's okay for blonde roux, or white roux, I'm sorry.
So it's not absolutely necessary to clarify the butter this week.
Yeah, it's okay for white roux just because you're not going to cook it long at all.
Yep.
But anything else, look how thin he's slicing that.
He's like a machine. The guy's crazy. He's like a machine.
Ooh.
Looking good.
Nice.
Delish. Absolutely. A couple of key things to pick up on from that video. Both times when he made the potato dishes, he put them onto a different vessel, right? So he put them in the pan, built them, made them look good, and then put them onto a sheet pan, and then put the whole sheet pan into the oven. Do that and get in the habit of doing that now. In industry, if you put it into the oven and then it boils over to the side, then you're working with a torched oven for all day, and your foods pick up that smoky flavor, everything else, and then you're stuck cleaning an oven at the end of service that night, so it's not fun. Always put it on a sheet pan you will save yourself a lot of pain in the long run. And then as well, you notice he made the bechamel first. Make the bechamel first, put it to the side, allow it to cool before you add it to your potatoes directly. You don't want to add the bechamel sauce when it's very, very hot to the scalloped potatoes, because otherwise it's going to cause problems, and we don't need problems in our lives. Hey, and then on to the Palms puree. How many people out there have made mashed potatoes? Okay, we're not gonna delve into this too much, other than a couple of key points when it comes to making mashed potatoes. I used to make mashed potatoes all the time when I was a youngin', what we would do is we just boil them in a pot. You know, they beat the heck out of each other while they're boiling and disintegrate, and then drain them, and then throw them in the mixer and mix them until they were like nice and whatever. That's not the way we do it in industry. It's a different world. First thing you need to do is you need to peel your potatoes, your russet potatoes preferably, the starchy potatoes. You're going to peel them. Make sure you remove all the eyes and any imperfections from the potato. You're going to put them into a pot. When we make mashed potatoes, we do not, or Palms puree if we want to be fancy about it, we do not bring it to a raging boil, right? Because the potatoes will literally disintegrate as they're cooking, and that completely defeats the purpose because they absorb additional moisture. So you want to have it about a real high simmer. You're going to let them cook until you can put a fork into them, and that fork should just sink right into them. A big trick that we do in industry, when we drain them into a colander. That colander, then we just set the colander right on top of the pot, and we allow the potatoes to sit there for a few minutes. And you'll notice that all the steam is evaporating off those potatoes because we're trying to reduce the amount of moisture. Because if we have high moisture potatoes that go through our ricer, then they're going to take less butter and less cream, and they're going to have less flavor. So allow your potatoes to dehydrate for a few minutes doing that. Critical. And then the next big step when it comes to making the mashed potatoes, do not use a mixer. For the love of God, do not use a mixer. It is a bad thing, right? Mixers increase the way, or change the way the starches behave in potatoes. So if you put them in your KitchenAid mixer, it's going to make those potatoes much more stringy, much more elastic, and much more spongy. And what we're looking for is a really light, fluffy potato. Does that make sense to everybody? Right? If you don't have a ricer, you know, the round ricer, or a food mill that pushes it down through, if you don't have one, take your colander or your strainer basket, take a plastic spatula, push it down through the holes in the basket. You're going to be very thankful that you did. You're going to have warm cream and butter, not cold, but warm, right? And you're going to slowly add it into your potatoes. You're only going to mix your potatoes until that stuff becomes fully incorporated. Does that make sense? Do not overmix the potatoes. The more you mix them, the more stringy they get, the more the starches change. You want to, when you bite into mashed potatoes, it should be a light, fluffy experience, not a dense experience. Right? How am I doing with that, Chef Matthew?
That's good. I use the word gluey because
gluey's good, yeah.
Yeah, and the processor never breaks them down, so they end up kind of grainy and gluey. And you can even see that when you look at them when they're put on the plate. You can see by the shine on them that they're gluey. And believe me, I know exactly what I'm talking about because I've done that. I've made that mistake, and I learned that food processor does not work. The mixer will overdo it. They're just too powerful for that. It doesn't need that much mixing.
And what's going to happen as you guys are learning this, as you guys go out to eat, you know, you're going to sit down at the restaurant, they're going to serve you mashed potatoes, and you're going to be like, you know, and it happens as you become more educated about food. I want to answer Tonia's question real quick. She's had her hand up patiently here for the last few minutes.
So the mashed potatoes, or however you say the word.
Palms puree?
Yes. Do we not cut them in cubes, or do we just do them as a full potato?
But okay, you don't want to cut them into cubes because that exposes more surface and it forces them to absorb more water. The more water they absorb, the less cream and butter that you're going to be able to add to the product. So in a worst case scenario, you can cut them in half. So if your potatoes like that, cut it in half, and then that's enough. The only real reason to cut them down into cubes is for time saving measures, but you're going to end up with a more liquidy potato.
Okay, that makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Good question.
Are there any other questions out there?
I mean, just to comment on mashed potatoes, I think the best ones are made just like that, the whole potato or cut in half, and then you drain the water out and use a whisk, get a big whisk and just start mashing them right there in the pot. And they're also, like the recipe says, hot milk, hot cream. If you put cold milk and cold cream, you stop the ability of that starch to mash. So it'll make lumpy mashed potatoes. So you want to make sure that cream and that milk are hot going in there.
It's like letting the Ford run low on oil, you know? That old engine will seize up on you. You don't want that. Not good. Let's take a look at this week's assignment. I know Chef Matthew is going to help me out with this one here because we want to make sure that we all understand Dauphinoise potatoes this week are to be made with the starchy potatoes. The starchy potatoes are defined as being the Idaho or the russets primarily. And the scallop potatoes that you're making this week with the bechamel sauce are to be made with the waxy potatoes, which are defined as the new potatoes, the red potatoes, the Yukon Gold potatoes. And then for the Palms Puree, you're going to use the russet potatoes. Does everybody understand that? Any questions about that? No, everybody good? So taking a look at the assignment page this week, the standard self-identification photo, make sure you're looking good in your uniform. As we get closer to the end of this course, we want to make sure that we're sending you off in ship shape off to C121. So we want to make sure that you're looking good. Sanitizing bucket, test strip, still critical. Proper mise en place laid out on your workstation. Brush, yes.
I don't see anything on the screen.
Oh, you don't see anything on the screen?
No. Am I the only? Okay.
Oh, that's horrible. What has happened?
Maybe it didn't share.
How are we doing now?
It likes you now. That's perfect.
Wow. Yeah. Actually, I switched to a new system here, and I've got 3 monitors, and it's just, I don't think I have the brain capacity to operate all 3 of them. That's kind of an issue. But anyway, going back, we're going to have our self-identification photo, sanitizer bucket, mise en place, picture of your bechamel, properly prepared, showing consistency, thinly sliced the potatoes, the waxy, thinly sliced potatoes for the starchy, finished layered dish before baking, okay? So you're going to layer those potatoes in just like we talked about with the waxy and the starchy, and then you're going to, when it comes out of the oven, you need to cut a entree-sized portion, okay? And we talked about that, about 4 to 6 ounces. Once again, we don't need the hungry man portion on there. We don't need a full plate size, just a regular size. So we have Chef Matthew.
So just make sure I can see that the bechamel is going into the starchy one, and then the, milk and cream is going into the, I'm sorry, I have it the other way around. Make sure the bechamel goes into the waxy one, and the milk and cream goes into the starchy one.
Right. So you'll take a picture before it goes into the oven, and then you'll take a picture after it comes out of the oven. Right? That would be 7 through 9, or 7 through 10 rather. A finished layered dish before baking, finished layered dish after baking. Does everybody understand that? So before it goes in the oven and when it comes out of the oven, and then the entree size portion. Feel free to garnish it if you like. It's a great way to start beginning to express yourself. Make sure you don't deter from the actual picture itself. Don't go crazy on your garnishes. and make sure that the garnish that you use does complement the actual dish that you're serving. Okay, so you don't want to put like a fried piece of bacon over the top to garnish it because it just doesn't complement what you're trying to serve. The pomme puree, self-identification photo, sanitizing bucket, mise en place, simmering potatoes, riced potatoes. So if you don't have a ricer, you don't have a food mill, push them through your colander. That'll work just fine as well. And then your finished potato puree. And don't forget your narrative sheet. Extremely important this week. Chef Matthew, do you have anything to add to that?
Make sure, and it's getting better and better, and some of you did a fantastic job, but one point that some people are still missing is that each recipe needs to have commentary. So in the observations, I want to see something about each dish, and before and after. And before means, you know, hey, I put it in the oven and checked it after 10 minutes and the potatoes were still firm. That's before. After 20 minutes, they were soft. I took the top off so they could brown. Then that would be, you know, after. So just an example. So make sure each dish gets mentioned in that observation and each dish gets mentioned in the taste.
Good point. Good point. Let's answer some questions here real quick. How about Doriel? Can you hear me?
Hey, Chef. Yes, I'm here.
Hi.
I have a question. To all the potatoes, are we using all of the potatoes? Are we using heavy cream for all 3 potatoes?
No. You refer to the recipe. There's milk and cream. Milk and cream go for the dauphinoise, and then milk for the bechamel sauce, and then cream for the potatoes.
So the cream, but y'all do prefer us using heavy cream.
Correct.
And would it be like, okay.
In industry, I think you're going to get into that when you get into your baking thing. There are several different types of heavy cream, from manufacturer's cream, which will have a higher fat content, to whipping cream, all the way down to whipping cream, which has a lower fat content. But generally, we refer to it as cream, and that would be heavy cream.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yes, and can we like use mashed potato masher, like to push the potatoes through our colander?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Thank you. How about
Good
Tonya? Tonya, did you have another question?
No, I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry.
Oh, okay. We don't mind. How about Nate? What you got going on, man?
Hey, when we're mashing the potatoes, can we use a spoon possibly? I'm not sure if that's acceptable or.
If that's the best thing you have, it's going to be a little bit labor intensive. But if that's the best you have, you can do it. Just remember, the less is more. All you want to do is just incorporate. So once you've run those potatoes through your ricer, you can actually use a spatula just to stir that stuff all in together. You're just blending it until it's done.
Yeah, I would. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So a spoon or a spatula, anything like that should work, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
What were you going to say, Chef Matthew?
That makes me think, your question there makes me think mashed potatoes can be overmixed. So it's important to put all those ingredients in before you mash, so that you do all your mixing in one move. Then they're all smashed and they're all mixed all in one time. Because if you put in the cream, then mix it, then you put in the butter, then mix it, and then you put in salt. No, it needs more salt. No, it needs more. Then you're going to overmix those potatoes.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I've had that problem before when we made homemade mashed potatoes. I had like things separately and they came out either too runny or too thick, one or the other.
yeah.
I ran into that problem before, so that makes perfect sense right there.
All or nothing. Yep. Does that answer your question, Nate?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions out there? Ladies and gents, thank you so much for another good live session. I am so looking forward to your assignments in week 9. Remember, we're almost there. You guys are rocking the house. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.
One thing.
What's that?
One thing. Friday, I'm going to extend all the submissions that are under 100%. I'm going to extend them till Tuesday. So if you miss something, or I take 20 points off for this or that, except for being on time. But if you miss something, you're going to have from Friday all the way till Tuesday at midnight to make it up. You guys have seen my emails before, haven't you? I'm announcing it in class today, so want to make sure you hear that. So look out for that if you miss something. And
it's recorded.
I'm sorry?
And it's recorded.
Yeah.
And it's recorded. Yeah, you got me on tape.
Live.
Nate, you had your hand back up?
Hey, Chef, are you talking about the assignment that we did this week that you're till Friday? Is that what you're talking about, or the assignment coming up now?
It'll be this Friday for the most recent one. Yep.
Okay.
Good question.
Sweet. Yep. Thank you.
I'm going to do that every Friday from now till the end. Probably the last week that won't work, but because we don't have it until next week. But so good question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gents, everybody have a great week. Talk to you soon.